They called it the Dead Wing, for reasons that had nothing to do with superstition. 3 colonial survey teams had worked through it over 40 years. Geologists, xenoarchaeologists, a team of military engineers who'd brought instruments sensitive enough to read thermal variance in a single carved glyph. Every sensor, every probe, every specialist's report had come back the same: inert, structurally compromised, of no scientific or strategic value. The hull was sealed, logged as a debris hazard, and left off every station map worth reading. That was the official record. I know, because I read it. I had a lot of time. My name is Dale Morse. I was 61 years old when I was assigned to clear the Dead Wing, and I had been inmate 4 Cova 7 for 11 of those years. The labor extraction facility at Vennath Station did not require its inmates to understand their assignments. It required them to show up at shift start, carry what they were told to carry, and not ask questions that would earn them an extension. I had learned those 3 things slowly, and at considerable cost, but I had learned them. The wing assignment came through as a single line on the morning board: debris clearance, sector null, 1 operative, no tools beyond standard kit. The overseer read it off without looking up. Nobody else reacted. A sealed hall full of old stone was not an assignment anyone fought over. I went alone. The access corridor was long and cold, and smelled of mineral dust that had settled into permanence. The lighting strips along the ceiling were emergency only, a pale functional blue, and they cast everything in a tone that made the stone walls look drained of color. I had been through plenty of corridors like this. The facility had hundreds of them, and they all felt the same, like the space between somewhere and nowhere, like a passage that existed only to be crossed, not to be remembered. The hall itself stopped me at the threshold. I am not a man easily stopped. 11 years had trained whatever reflex makes a person pause out of me, but I stood in the entrance for longer than I care to admit, because the space I was looking at did not match anything on the station schematic. The schematic had shown a collapsed interior, roughly 40 meters in each dimension, cluttered with fallen structural panels and survey debris. What I was looking at was closer to a cathedral. The ceiling climbed perhaps 30 meters at its apex, and it was not collapsed. It was intact, and across its full span, carved work ran in channels so fine and so deep that even the emergency blue of the corridor strips, filtering in behind me, caught in them and gave the whole vaulted surface a faint traced quality, like the negative of a map drawn by hands that understood something about geometry that I did not. The floor was clear of debris except for the outer perimeter. At the center of the hall, elevated on a broad dais of pale stone, stood the throne. I am going to be precise, because I have thought about this description for a long time. The throne was approximately 4 meters in height. It was carved from a single piece of material I have no adequate name for, not stone in any sense I understood, not metal, but something in between, something that had a quality of depth when the light caught it, as though its surface was not the last layer but only the first. The armrests terminated in carved shapes that were almost hands, open-palmed and upward-facing. The back rose to a point, and was covered in the same fine channeled work as the ceiling. The whole thing had a stillness that was not the stillness of an inert object, but the stillness of something waiting. I knew I was there to clear debris. The debris was in the perimeter. I started on the perimeter. I worked for 3 hours. The fallen structural panels were lighter than they looked, which was the only mercy the morning offered. I stacked them in the access corridor in the order the disposal team would need to retrieve them. I swept dust. I took my time. I was not, at any point, thinking about the throne. At the end of the 3rd hour, I sat down on the lowest step of the dais to eat my ration. This is the part I have told myself, in the years since, could have gone differently. If I had been less tired, I would have stood. If I had been less tired, I would not have set my hand against the stone beside me to steady myself as I sat. If I had been less tired, nothing that followed would have followed. But I was 61 years old, and I had been moving stone panels for 3 hours, and I sat down on the step, and I put my hand against the carved surface of the throne's base to lower myself, and the stone was warm. Not the ambient warmth of a material that has absorbed heat from a functioning environment. Specifically, directionally warm. Warm in the way that a living thing is warm, from the inside out. I took my hand away. The warmth had moved into my palm in the second of contact. I looked at my hand. I put it back. The channels ignited. Not all at once. It moved like water finding a path. The channel nearest my palm first, then branching. The branching accelerating. The acceleration becoming a flood. In the time it took me to stand upright, the inscription network had traveled from the base of the dais across the full face of the throne and into the ceiling, every fine carved line filling with a light the color of deep gold, a warm gold that was nothing like the emergency blue of the corridor, and nothing like any illumination source I had seen in 11 years on Vennath Station. The hall went from functional shadow to something that felt like morning. I stood. I was not afraid. I have thought about that also, in the years since. A man who has served 11 years in a labor extraction facility develops a particular relationship with fear. He knows it precisely, knows its textures, knows the difference between the fear that means run and the fear that means stand still, and the absence of fear that means something beyond his experience is occurring, and his body does not yet have a category for it. What I felt when the light filled the hall was the third thing, a stillness in the chest, an absence of vocabulary. The throne turned to face me. Not dramatically. It moved the way a compass needle moves, a quarter rotation, smooth and level and without sound, and then it was facing me, the open-palmed armrests directed toward me, the apex of its back aligned with the hall's central axis, and I was standing on the step with my ration half-eaten in my free hand. The voice came from inside the stone, not from a speaker, not from a mechanism I could locate, from the stone itself, resonant and level, neither threatening nor gentle, precise in the way that a statement of record is precise. It said, "The line does not forget its own." I stood there for a long time after that. I know what the facility's records say about me. I know what the court said. I know what my number is, and what my classification is, and how many years I had left on my sentence when that morning began. I know all of that, the way I know the color of the corridor walls. It is information I carry. I do not need to feel it. But I also know what I heard in that hall, spoken by a thing that had been silent for longer than the facility had existed, longer than the colony, longer than the survey records that called it dead. The line does not forget its own. I did not know what line. I did not know the name of the bloodline. The throne's inscription network resolved into glyphs above the dais. A genealogy in light, 43 generations, terminating in a name that was mine, in a language I have since been told is 11,000 years old. I did not know any of that in the moment. In the moment I only knew that I was standing in a hall that 3 teams of experts had declared inert, and that the throne had been waiting, and that the thing it had been waiting for was a man the station called 4-7, eating a ration on the bottom step. The light did not go out when I left. The overseer's report said it was still lit when the response team arrived 6 hours later. The team's instruments, the same class of instruments that had declared the hall inert for 40 years, returned a single reading they could not categorize. They asked me, afterward, what I had done. I told them I had sat down. I do not know, even now, what I am in the language of that hall. King is the word the translators settled on, though they were careful to note it was the nearest approximation. Heir of a line so old, the colony's founding charter predates only the last 3 generations of it. I am still working through what that means. I suspect I will be for some time. What I know is this: something waited 11,000 years in a hall that everyone qualified to make the judgment called empty and dead and done. And when it spoke, it did not use my number. It used my name.